Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's pretty clear our definition of compassion when it comes to this topic is very different. So I'm going to speak to this issue purely from an insurance perspective because that is my area of expertise. Having specialized in insurance for 15 years, I can speak very confidently that the reason why you're not hearing from insurance companies is because we're authorizing them to charge more. And we're authorizing them to pay and force people to pay for a coverage that they likely don't want. And what you're actually doing is creating an illusory coverage in an insurance contract because you're creating an ambiguity when you're creating two different provisions of coverage where one cancels the other out. In property insurance, for example, you can opt in for certain coverages that provide for additional coverages above what the additional premium pays for an additional premium. And should you choose to not accept that coverage, you can opt out of it by signing a form. Because we have stopped transition access for minors, what we're actually doing is telling 18-year-olds and adult to pay for insurance that within a year policy period, because that's how long these policies last, don't want. And we're forcing them to pay for coverage that they don't want. And we're creating ambiguity in contracts that are able to be challenged in a court of law because the court doesn't really like illusory and ambiguous terms, which is what your bill creates. In addition to that, there are questions about how long people are going to be able to present claims for. If I have an insurance policy at the age of 18, and that's when I start taking the first medication to start my transition, and I decide 3 years later that I would like to detransition, what policy of coverage applies? Or are you forcing me once again to pay for coverage that I'm never actually going to be able to have access to? And I have a problem with that. I also have a problem with the fact that we're mandating coverage in a space where clearly we don't have a crisis and we know that we have an insurance crisis on our hands where we do not require and mandate auto insurance companies who write property insurance outside of our state to do it in the state of Florida. So if you want to have conversations about mandating coverage, I'm happy to do that in places where we have an actual crisis because this isn't it. To those of you who came, we appreciate you being here. Your stories are very important to us, and it's very important for those of us who believe that our job as representatives of individuals, of the people of Florida, of this state, and I believe my job as a representative is to not make government and make your life harder. You know, I live with a mental illness. I was diagnosed with bipolar at the age of 30, so the woman who came up and spoke about having an adult in crisis hit very close to home for me. And what I can say is it's very offensive to hear people talk about things they know nothing about. And I can tell you, if people were to stand up here and talk about my journey with mental health and my journey with bipolar as if they have firsthand experience about what that journey looks like, it's extremely offensive. You know nothing about it, and I don't pretend to know your journey. But my job as a legislator is to support you, is to support laws that protect you, that keep you safe, and do not get in your way. And that's all this bill does. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for being here. We hear you, we're listening, and I will never stop fighting for you.
Representative Escamani.